Mulberry Center. There are some of you, and the reason I have this in my hand is to remind me before I forget, there are some of you that are nurses or health professional colleagues that may want continuing education credit for this. I understand you have to have this signed at the front desk, is that right? And then you'll get credit for coming tonight. So that's a little bit of housekeeping stuff to get taken care of. I'm reminded of the story of the lady that was at the psychiatry institution for many, many, many years. This unfortunate woman had a form of schizophrenia that was thought to be totally untreatable. But finally, through the work of her psychiatrist and some talented therapists there, the day of her discharge was at hand. And she walked in the psychiatrist's office, and the psychiatrist said, "Joan, you've made wonderful progress. We never thought you would get well. I mean, here you were psychotic for so many years, and now you're finally well. This is a wonderful day indeed." And Joan was looking very glum, very sad. The psychiatrist couldn't figure it out. He said, "What's the matter, Joan? You're supposed to be happy. You're well. You're cured." She said, "Well, Doc, you got to remember one thing." He said, "When I came here, I was Joan of Arc. Now I'm just a nobody." The talk tonight, Death by Codependency, is a talk that I chose the title of very carefully. The reason is, women can actually die from codependency, and men can too. Although typically in our society we see women getting beaten to death, shot to death, knifed to death by perpetrators. And it's a very unfortunate problem. Now tonight we're going to aim to be liberated as we examine codependency and all that that means, because not only women but men can be codependent. And that reminds me of another story. I take great pride in picking the titles for my topics very carefully. And I knew that I was risking a little bit when I call this one Death by Codependency, because as any of my psychiatry and psychology colleagues will tell you, there ain't no such thing as codependency out there in the diagnostic nomenclature. We have dependent personality disorder. And a few people actually called the desk as if to say that we didn't know this and said, "Did you know that there's really no such thing as codependency?" Well, in terms of the books, yes, I do know there's no such thing as codependency. But in terms of real, everyday reality, there most certainly is. Now, codependency was a term that came to light probably in the 60s or 70s when there was a lot of chemical dependency work up really in Minnesota at Hazleton. And it was found that addicts, alcoholics that came in dependent on a substance frequently had spouses, partners, etc. that propagated that system. So the term codependent came into the nomenclature to mean somebody that was codependent on the substance, not dependent, not the person with the problem, but somebody that had the problem along with the individual because they were fostering that situation. Later on, it became the term to mean somebody that is in a very sick way, dependent in an enmeshed way on somebody else. Two people that are overly dependent are codependent on each other. So that's where the topic comes from, death by codependency, and that's what we're going to be talking about in a very fast-moving presentation this evening. And with that, if I could get somebody to hit the lights, we will proceed. Now, the track lights are going to stay on up there for any of you that tend to be afraid of the dark. So don't worry, we're not going to turn them all out. Death by codependency is as near as today's headlines. Now, I must tell you that I don't know if O.J. killed Nicole or not. I'm waiting to see what turns up in court. I do know that there was certainly a history of spouse abuse, which O.J. Simpson pled guilty to in court. Let me begin, and by the way, all of the stories that I'm going to share with you tonight from patients, I have their specific permission to share with you anonymously. This is really where this talk came from, because one morning I was sitting in group. It's actually the second story right here. What is codependent? Codependent is you're telling your female psychiatrist a story, and you see it's so sad that she begins to cry as she listens to it, and so you quickly change your story because you don't want to hurt her feelings and then pay her $75 at the end of the hour. And I said to myself when my patient told me that, you know, it's time I gave a lecture about this. This is another one. This is a woman that I was seeing for attention deficit disorder as well as codependency. Her relationship with her husband got off to a bad start. In fact, it was off on a bad start on the second date. She was a woman that ate a little bit slowly, and on that second date, she looked up in amazement as her date just lifted her steak right off of her plate. And she said, "Why did you do that?" And he said, "Well, because you eat slowly, and it was clear you weren't going to eat it, so I just thought I'd eat it to save the waste of food." Well, moving right along, here are some more examples, and these I have, again, permission from my patients to use. This was a woman who went with her significant other to a restaurant, and he would take a magazine along with him to read, to while away the time until dinner was served. Oh, it gets better. A same patient, this is the same patient, was out shopping for a car one day, and she had a pimple on her face, as some of us do, and her boyfriend, different boyfriend, just reached over and popped it, said it bothered him. One of my patients taught me a new word I never knew. I pride myself on a fairly expansive vocabulary, but I've never heard of this binking. She said, "I have this problem binking." I said, "What's binking?" She said, "Well, you know, I used to have 90 people on my Christmas shopping list, and now I've worked it down to 60. But I have problems because sometimes when I go in with my card, because I've rolled up to the limit, I give it to the clerk, and goes bink, bink, as she runs it through the machine. And it comes up with a message, over the limit. In other words, she was shopping and charging her way right into bankruptcy. It's another of my patients that was so depressed and so down because of a sick relationship for about a year and a half that she really didn't know how far down she was until she woke up one day and looked around her house and saw that there was dust everywhere. And only where she had just walked was where there was no dust. She'd been out of it for that long. The ADHD lady that I told you about a while back was called crazy by her family as she began working out of her codependency. One of the things that happens is when people change, sometimes sick families don't like it. Another of my patients was thought to be cracking up by her family as she changed. And this perhaps is the ultimate story. The ultimate story. Now, you know, I grew up with the good old boys in Texas, and then I went up to Minnesota, and now since I moved to Indiana, I'm a Hoosier. And we Hoosiers are fond of basketball, but this lady's significant other actually took it farther than any I have ever heard of. See, this lady grew up with an unfortunate childhood. The kind of childhood guaranteed to set one up for codependency. And on her honeymoon, while she and her new husband were having sex, he was watching basketball on TV. And she's still with it. Let us begin at the beginning, as Horace said. Once a task is begun, half the work's over with. You got to start somewhere. Once you start, you can make some progress. Tonight, this is what we're going to cover by the end of the talk. We are going to examine codependency. We're going to look at the stereotypes of codependency, and we're going to scrupulously avoid the blame game. I'm not going to tell you it's the bad men that abuse the women, and it's the wimp women that take it. No stereotypes tonight, okay? No wimp women and abusing, vicious, sadistic, ought to put them in jail men. I'm not going to be talking about. We're going to understand this principle of the cognitive feedback loop, which will be appearing in my book, which will come out this year. We're going to review other things that can go wrong when people get codependency. We're going to look at a holistic approach to healing codependency. And at the end of this talk, I hope to have motivated you which, as my buddy Zig Ziglar says, is nothing more than drawing out. I hope to have motivated you, if you have codependency, to start now, to do it now, to make a beginning. What is codependency or dependent personality disorder? The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders defines dependent personality as the following. First of all, you have an overarching view. Dependent personality is a pervasive and excessive need to be taken care of that leads to submissive and clinging behavior and fears of separation beginning by early adulthood and present in a variety of contexts. And these are the contexts. 8 of them. While I'm thinking about it. Group therapy for the treatment of codependency, a women's group approach. This little trifold brochure that I wrote that's over there. On the inside cover is the codependency checklist right here. And also, at the end of the talk, I never get them out before the talk or everybody will be flipping through them. At the end of the talk, you can have handouts of every slide that you're going to see tonight, besides the cartoons. So don't worry about taking frantic notes. Any 5 of these 8. Difficulty making everyday decisions without excessive amounts of advice or assurance, needing others to assume responsibility for most major areas of your life, difficulty expressing disagreement because of fear of loss of support or approval, difficulty initiating projects, going to excessive lengths to obtain nurturance from others, being uncomfortable or helpless when alone, urgently seeking another relationship as a source of care, and unrealistically being preoccupied with fears of being left to take care of yourself. Pick 5. If you have it, then you have the diagnosis. And that's a gold standard diagnosis of dependent personality disorder. Now, you don't have to have all 5 to still have a significantly screwed up life, let me tell you. Looking back to the greats of thought, Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, a guy that my wife just told me the other day became Roman emperor because he was really a basically good guy and the only one that could be trusted. And also I think the last of the Stoic philosophers said this: every man values himself more than all other men, but he always values others' opinions of him more than his own. That's one of the hallmarks of codependency, valuing others' opinions of yourself more than your own opinion. Also, Robert Burton said, a blow with a word strikes deeper than a blow with a sword. Many of my patients talk about how they've been hurt and made miserable by very nasty comments that their parents said. Had an adolescent patient with anorexia recently, told me that his father was always calling him a stupid dumbass over and over and over. And it led into the development of anorexia. These are some of the things that my patients tell me. I just feel so worthless. And then there's the struggle for, are they right or is their family right? There's a struggle, a sense of struggle. Are they right in their head or is their family right? And this person said, sometimes I feel like my family is right. I mean, things can't be as screwed up as I think they are. Yes, they can. They certainly can be that screwed up. I just don't know why this stuff keeps happening to me. Somebody else dumped me. You know? Somebody else is getting invited to the party, but I'm not. Somebody else got the promotion. There's always somebody else is getting the stuff, and the bad stuff keeps happening to you. And a woman that I knew, one of my patients that had a relationship with a man that was probably a criminal, said, I just can't get rid of him. I can't kick him out. I just can't do it. Very sick relationship, couldn't stop it. This is what people in Codependence Anonymous talk about. And I have Linda Pruitt, the assistant administrator at Mulberry Center, to thank for this. She tells me that people in CODA talk a lot about exhaustion and perfectionism. The exhaustion happens because codependents are so busy taking care of other people instead of taking care of themselves. The perfectionism happens because nothing is ever good enough, because it can't be good enough because you're worthless and you know you're worthless, so it can't be good enough. That's one of the reasons. The kid's behavior can't be good enough. And this perfectionism, even if you're successful, but not 100% totally, divinely, perfectly successful, you still can't claim credit for that because you're not successful enough. Keeps your self-concept down. Always pushed down, always held back by your own limiting beliefs, and all of this sets you up for easy victimization by anybody. What causes it? I've told you what it is. What causes it? Well, basically, there are two things that cause codependency. One is a miserable childhood. And the other is bad stuff. Now, you can have bad stuff happen to you at any time in your life. You can have the Ozzie and Harriet kind of family, Leave It to Beaver childhood, Brady Bunch childhood, call it what you want. I mean, Little Miss Perfect or Little Mr. Perfect childhood, and you can go ahead and go through life and then get beaten down by a bad relationship or getting laid off or downsized or outplaced or whatever. Life events which can demoralize you. But number one, bad childhood, growth and development issues. My friend Terry Kellogg, who wrote the book Broken Toys, Broken Dreams, talks about boundary violations. Chapter 8 is all about boundary violations. Sometimes I assign the book and I say, read Chapter 8, highlight every boundary violation that you have experienced. Boundary violations are things like, you stupid! You stupid dumbass! Can't you do better than that? I'm ashamed of you. You know, mean, hurtful things. Or even worse, just total ignorance, just ignoring the child. Just don't give a rip. Lack of love and warmth. Emotional starvation. We'll look at what that emotional starvation does to somebody. But one of the things I'll tell you that it does is it makes you feel like you're not a very worthwhile person. Because if you were a worthwhile person, then mommy and daddy would be saying, I love you, you're a good kid, etc. Worthlessness ends up as a common thread, and then the motor which keeps driving codependency is this frantic need for achievement of a sense of worth. That's the driving force. That's what keeps it going. What promotes it? We talked about what causes it. Number one, growth and development issues, or number two, devastating life events. What promotes it? Well, first of all, if you already feel that you're worthless, that's not a very good place to start. Then you encourage these ongoing boundary violations. Everybody can take advantage of you. I'm not worthwhile anyway, so why not let them take advantage of me? It leads to failure in life, depression, sometimes alcohol and chemical dependency. The reason that people get hooked on booze and drugs is they want to numb out to avoid dealing with the problems. I mean, if you were that miserable, who wouldn't want to numb out so you wouldn't have to deal with the problems? Is this making sense to people? Can I just see heads go up and down if it's making sense? Good. All right. Now, here's one of the things that promotes codependency. Romance novels. Now you say, oh, now, Doc, you're talking about one of my favorite things. So I went out this weekend and I saw what was available out there at one of my favorite purveyors of groceries, not romance novels. And this is what was there. This is what people in USA Today said. Shervin and Chernovsky, back in January of this year, there are a couple of therapists, and they said romance novels amount to 49% of all paperbacks sold. 25 million American women are reading 20 per month. According to my calculation, that's 5 per week or 1 per weekday. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. What's the lure? The lure is you're going to be saved by some hunk that's going to ride in on a white horse and take you away from all your problems. And I cite Pretty Woman as an example. My sister-in-law told me once, yeah, I liked that movie. In fact, I even bought the tape. I thought, now wait a minute. This is a story about a prostitute that hasn't made it on her own yet, and the only way that she's going to get ahead is by enticing this Wall Street raider, who's not exactly the paragon of virtue anyway, to take her away into the sunset, and that's how she's going to be taken care of. Now, you said nobody would fall for that. Well, I have got some research for you tonight. Just wait till you see what I've got in store for you. These, according to Shervin and Chernovsky, are the typical plots. Every plot in a romance novel follows this way. Number one, he pursues. Number two, she resists. Number three, he overcomes. Number four, his sexuality is dangerous, aggressive, and forceful. Number, what are we on here? 5, she is swept away. And the conclusion, she is rescued from a life of virtuous, passionless oblivion. shekel. I double dog dare you, as we used to say down home, to go to any bookstore or any grocery store, buy one of these romance novels and check it out. See what you think. In the Adolescence magazine, we find out that tainted love is available for consumption even as an adolescent. 65% of the nation's teenage girls have relationships with an abusive boyfriend and have been too afraid to talk about it. More than 35% of teens in California reported abuse in a dating relationship. Now, why do you suppose that is? It's because of what goes into their mind. So I decided to do some scientific research and go to the literature to find out what the authorities had to say. In this month's Cosmo, March 1995, also available at your favorite bookstore or grocery store, you too can learn the world-class courtesan secrets for landing wealthy, powerful men. Now, what this article says, the secrets of the courtesans and what you can learn from them, including, of course, Marla Maples up here, is this. Forget about yourself. One woman that wrote a very interesting book said, men are just desserts. In other words, women ought to be self-sufficient by themselves. Who needs men? I think that's a little bit radical, but it's still a very self-sufficient, I'm in charge here kind of attitude. This woman, Sydney Burroughs, the Mayflower Madam, said, courtesans historically knew that to secure their place in the king's heart, they had to provide much more than just great or far-out sex. A significant part of their role was to fulfill his needs for affection, companionship, and friendship. Now, what do? You forget about your own needs, and you serve as a doormat to a man. Just forget about your needs. If the man you are after likes to dance all night, I suggest you become the ultimate party girl. If you love sailing, you must not only learn to sail, but be knowledgeable about boats, especially the kind he owns. If he has a passion for breeding racehorses, you must be well-versed in the subject of thoroughbreds, as well as exhaustively well-informed about the racing world. Page 174, this month. Check it out. In other words, forget about you. Just serve as the total doormat, the total purveyor of all of the needs for your dominant, powerful male. I think that's a very unliberated position for women to be in. So, what have we talked about? We've talked about what we're going to say tonight. I gave you an overview of the talk. We talked about what is codependency. We talked about where does codependency come from. We've talked about some of the ways it's propagated. Now let's talk about what some of the consequences of codependency are. Well, one consequence is you can wake up dead. Death is a very big consequence. Morbidity and mortality. Mortality is death. But you can also have ongoing sickness. You can be chronically unhappy. You can be languishing in a sort of never affective state where you're sometimes not really happy, you're not really sad, but you're certainly not happy. You're just sort of there. Something isn't quite right, you're not exactly certain what it is, but you know you're not happy. Or you can go through multiple failed relationships. The reason you go through multiple failed relationships is you make bad choices. The reason you make bad choices is you don't think well enough of yourself to begin with to make good choices. So you make bad choices, and then you screw up, and the relationship goes over. And then because you feel worthless, you have this restless sense to go for another, go for another, go for another. Maybe the next one is going to be better. So then you go for the next one, and because you're the same person you were when you came out of the previous failed relationship, you get stuck in another messed up relationship. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. And even if you have a healthy significant other, you can exhaust the poor fellow or a woman by this frantic need to be taken care of. And mortality, you can kill yourself because you figure it would be better to be dead than live with that much pain, or you can be killed. And this usually occurs from a male significant other, but not always. Now, some of you that have heard me talk about depression in the past know that I like to categorize things. I like this Gomer Pyle USMC episode where Gomer categorized everything as animal, vegetable, or mineral. He organized the entire PX according to his animal, vegetable, or mineral system. And of course, when the guy that was running the PX came back at the end, nobody could make head nor tails of Gomer's system. Well, I'm not here to say it was a good system or a bad system, but at least it was a system. At least it was an attempt to organize. So I'd like to break down depression and what can happen from codependency into animal, vegetable, or mineral. Animal is you got an honest biological depression. There is something wrong in your brain. There are some neurotransmitters that are out of whack up there. Vegetable, you have a reactive dysphoria. In other words, because of what's going on, you are reactively sad or upset about it. Perhaps you don't have a full-blown major depression, but you're certainly not happy about what's going on. Mineral, you have this learned helplessness, hopelessness model from being beaten down, but you don't have a real chemical imbalance. Any of these things are possible. Now, when we look in terms of treatment modalities or ways we've got of fixing things in contemporary psychiatry, the number one most important thing to do is you got to have the diagnosis. You have to know what you're treating before you can go. You have to make a diagnosis. Now, there are basically two flavors in psychiatry. You got the things that you can fix with a pill or medication or shock treatments, and you got the things that you can't fix with a pill or the shock treatments, and that is personality or character problems, and it's over here where dependent personality disorder lives. Can't fix dependent personality disorder with a pill or bringing in somebody and giving them electroconvulsive therapy. This has to be shrunk out of you, if you will. You have to have some talk therapy, learning to talk about your feelings and what's going on. So you got to have the diagnosis. You got to figure out whether it's a personality disorder or a real underlying, I shouldn't say real, whether it's an underlying biological disorder, and then pick your therapy accordingly. When you're talking about dependent personality disorder, the best therapy is right here, psychotherapy. And sometimes this personality disorder, because of getting beaten down, stressed out, hammered down over and over and over and over and over, then you can develop some other problems to go along with it, like a depression, where you might need medications as well as some psychotherapy. When we look at depression, there are really two kinds that I want to talk about tonight. There are several more, but I don't want to be overly complicated. This is the sort of junior grade depression, dysthymia. And really, dysthymia refers to being a little bit down, a little bit depressed, a little bit blue, more days than not, for a minimum of 2 years. More days than not for a minimum of 2 years. That's dysthymia, junior grade depression. Major depression can be a significant consequence of codependency. One of the things that, in fact, the main thing that causes depression is stress. Overwhelming, constant stress. You can get laboratory rats depressed by stressing them. I could get even the most healthy, well-adjusted one of you here tonight. I mean, we've got about 350, looks like, people here tonight. If I could sort of line you up and figure out which is the most healthy, the least likely to be depressed among you, I guarantee you I could get you depressed. All I'd do is I'd put you in a rubber room, I'd play loud punk rock music, I'd keep you up, 23, 24 hours, I'd put wire grids underneath your feet, I'd zap you with electric current irregularly so that you couldn't predict it. I'd constantly hammer you with that. I'd flash the lights on in an unpredictable fashion. I guarantee you if I had you for 2 or 3 weeks, I'd get you depressed. That's stress, and it causes physical neurochemical changes in the brain. Well, there are 9 symptoms of depression, and this is in your handout. I have them organized in an acronym called CECAPS. Really, this is in the DSM-4. That's that book I told you about where we diagnose psychiatric and mental disorders. And basically it goes like this. You gotta be sad. Gotta have that. And you have to have lost some interest, some hobbies. Now, if you got those 2 things, then you only need 3 more. Sleep, problems, feeling guilty, poor energy, poor concentration, poor appetite. Usually poor appetite. Sometimes it can be increased appetite. Feeling slowed down or sped up, these psychomotor symptoms, and then thoughts of offing yourself. Now, I always tell people, if you're a good Catholic or highly religious, then you don't have to be suicidal. Now, it doesn't say that in the DSM-4, but this is the DSM-4 according to Cady. You don't have to be suicidal if you're a good Catholic or religious. One of my very religious patients told me, when I drive down the road, I see those little crosses out by the side of the road, and I wish one of them were me. That's good enough for me. She wanted to be dead. She wasn't going to do it, but it'd be just fine with her if she were. That's good enough. I'd check that one off. Now, how much of depression is out there? Quite a lot. Men and women. Men, 7.7% of you this year are going to become depressed. In a lifetime, 12.7%. Women, this year, 12.9% of you are going to become depressed, and over a lifetime, 1 in 5 of you are going to become depressed. Those are the odds right now, and it's going up every 7 years. So in another 7 years, it might be even higher. Stress is what causes depression. And depression in the brain is caused by what we feel is a dysregulation or a screw-up, if you will. Something is out of kilter up there in these 3 chemicals: dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin. Now, serotonin is all the rage these days, and with good reason, because since 1987 we've had a particular class of drugs called the serotonin-specific reuptake inhibitors. It works for depression very nicely, but also does not have a lot of the bad side effects of the other medications. However, simply because we have a medication class with few side effects does not mean that these other categories of neurotransmitters are somehow now totally irrelevant. So we need to keep all 3 in mind. What have we talked about so far? We've talked about an overview. We've talked about what is codependency. We've talked about where it comes from. We've talked about what promotes it. We've talked about morbidity and mortality. In other words, being sick and also being dead because of codependency. And now we're going to talk more about being sick, and then we're going to talk about being dead again. Statistics. 1 out of 3 U.S. women will be assaulted at some time in her married life by her partner. 1 out of 3. And of those of you that aren't attached, those women of you that aren't attached, 30% of you are going to be assaulted by a partner. Now, does this mean that you're codependent and your partner is a no-good scumbag and you ought to get rid of him? No. It doesn't. We're not going to engage in a blame game here, but these are the statistics right here, according to the American Psychological Association, 1994. And also, according to them, the biggest risk factors for violence, 3 things. Witnessing parental violence as a child. You see, this begins to program it into you. This is acceptable. This is the way normal people act because mommy and daddy act this way, so this is normal. So the kid says, oh, this is normal. Mommy and daddy beat each other, so that means most mommies and daddies beat each other, so when they grow up, mommies and daddies beat each other. That's the way it plays out. Being sexually aggressive toward your wife, for men, also correlates with an increased tendency to violence. Now, this doesn't mean sexually amorous. This means sexually aggressive in probably a maladaptive way. And then also acting violently towards children is a risk factor. Homicide. We talked about being beaten up. Now let's talk about getting killed. These are the statistics. In 1988, there were 8,603 solved murders. Now, there are a whole lot more that weren't solved, but these were the ones that were solved. They found that family murders, 62% of them occur at night, and they found a disparity between whites and African Americans. Whites, the wives were killed by their husbands 2/3 of the time. African Americans, the wives were killed by their husbands 53% of the time, and husbands were killed by their wives 47% of the time. What the significance of this is, I'm not certain, but this is the way it broke down. Interestingly, remember that I told you that sometimes people numbed out with alcohol and drugs in order to avoid dealing with the pain? Well, look here, 1/2 of the killers and 1/3 of the victims were drinking at the time. Alcohol decreases inhibition and makes violent acts a lot more likely to happen. Offspring were killed 2 times as often by the parents as the reverse. I've seen lots of news articles about children being killed now recently. When a daughter kills, 80% of the time the victim is her father, and when a son kills, 50-50 chance father or mother. These are the current statistics. Well, what happens if you are a woman and you leave an abusive, controlling man? Well, this man, February 11, 1995, sent his wife a mail bomb. It exploded when she opened it at work. Suffered shrapnel wounds and burns over half her body. Murder for hire, more popular. This was a very interesting story about a man who hired a 19-year-old teenage hitman to get rid of his wife. The guy went to the wife, said, "I don't feel good about this." She said, "Hey, no problem. Go kill him. That'll make it all right." So she hired him. And it ended up that the police caught all 3 of them. And it's being worked out now. But it's very interesting. According to this one security analyst, at least 1,039 murder-for-hire cases have been filed by authorities since 1988. That's on the rise. How come? Why are people saying violence is an acceptable alternative? If you don't like your spouse, if you don't like your husband, well, hire a hit on them. You know, don't live with them forever. Instead of Toys R Us, it's going to be Hits R Us. Well, here's another. This one happened 1 week ago. This was last Monday night. An Indianapolis woman was stabbed to death by her husband because she refused to give him $5 that she was saving for milk money for their children. 10-year-old daughter witnessed the stabbing. Now, I would like to emphasize that this priest does not speak for all Catholics. That's a good thing. Because this priest says that killing, if it serves your purposes, is okay. You know, if you kill an abortion doctor, it's okay. I'm not comfortable with that. Whether or not you come down on either side of abortion, I am not comfortable in saying it's okay to hire a hitman or go out and gun somebody down because you don't believe the way they do. And when you have clerics saying that, I think we've got big problems. Again, I emphasize, this man does not speak for the Catholic Church or organized religion. But I think he's a symptom of an underlying problem in society where increasingly the ends justify the means. Here are some other consequences of codependency. We've talked about getting beaten up. We've talked about getting killed. We've talked about getting depressed. We've talked a little bit about numbing out with drugs and alcohol. You can develop an eating disorder because food is a mood stabilizer. As any patient that goes through the Mulberry Center Life Balance program will tell you, food is a wonderful mood stabilizer. You eat a lot of food, it makes you feel better for a while. You can overeat, you can binge eat, or you can starve yourself, and there are dynamic reasons for each one of those eventualities. You can chemically anesthetize yourself with drugs, and you can also engage in high-risk behaviors. You can drink and drive. You can have unprotected sex. You can have unprotected anonymous sex. I was talking with a couple of patients recently that talked about having multiple partners with unprotected and sometimes anonymous sex. That's a high-risk behavior. You can contract something that nobody can fix with a pill that way. And underneath it all, which I maintain is driven by the unconscious, there's this notion, I'm worthless, and furthermore, the activity suggests that not only do you feel worthless, but you don't even feel like you deserve to live, because if you did, you wouldn't be fooling around doing things like that to begin with. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Now, at this point, I want to come back and I want to insist that we avoid stereotypes and the blame game. I'm not here to say, you poor women, you know, poor things, you're all getting beaten up and so forth, as those mean, nasty men that are doing it. Sometimes that is exactly what happens. But there are some men that have problems with dependency or codependency as well. And that can be because of the way they grew up or what happened to them. And we're also going to actually look at the dynamic roots behind men that abuse. Why does that happen? Are they really villains or are they too victims? Here's some other outcomes. This perhaps is if you don't have all 5 symptoms of dependent personality. If you're not floridly codependent, shall we say, but you're still somewhat compromised. For one thing, you can be cowed by bosses. You can say, I just never seem to have enough time. I can't handle it. You can say, why doesn't anybody ever ask me out? Somebody else is always getting asked out. Just when you make a getaway from one relationship, you can have, instead of the return of the Pink Panther, you can have the return of codependency. You can get in another relationship where, again, you get hooked in. And you can also have chronic low-grade depression. Why? Why can't you stop hurting yourself? If there are those of you that are codependent here tonight, and I assume that some of you are, haven't you ever asked yourself this question when you're lying in bed at night before you go to sleep? Why can't I stop hurting myself? Why does this stuff keep happening? Why am I letting it keep happening? Why am I so unhappy? Well, first of all, you got to remember this feeling of worthlessness, which is at the core. It's a self-propagating problem, and I'll show you how it goes around and around and around on this cognitive feedback loop shortly. Secondly, it's not always correctly diagnosed. You can come into the purveyor of psychiatric or psychologic services, and this person, man or woman, can say, well, madam, or well, sir, what you have is depression or dysthymia. Let me give you some Prozac, or Zoloft, or Paxil, or Effexor, or Nortriptyline. You know, I'll take your depression away. And the underlying codependency, this gnawing sense of worthlessness, of never being good enough, is still there and never gets addressed. Let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, pills do not solve every problem. And if you try to solve all the problems of somebody with a pill, frequently you miss the diagnosis. Finally, codependency can graduate from the psychological dependent personality disorder to a biological disorder, where you have really florid depression and you really get beaten down, and then not only do you feel worthless to begin with, but then you're so psychomotorically retarded, so slow, so with such decreased energy, decreased concentration, that you can't even think your way out of a paper bag, much less even begin to think about how you got so codependent to begin with, that you're just spiraling down. It's like watching a little fleck of soap as it circles the drain in your tub right before it just gets sucked right down. I mean, that's the way it goes. Around and around and around and down the drain. And then finally, because people have this gnawing sense of worthlessness, they say, well, it couldn't be anything else. It just must be me. Must be something wrong with me. Why doesn't the patient get treatment? Well, first of all, the patient feels worthless. Why should they deserve treatment? Why should they deserve to feel better? This worthlessness keeps gnawing away, devouring the person, constantly. They say, I'm not worth it. This is what one patient told my office manager, I can't afford therapy, I guess I'll just have to stay codependent. I guess so. Let me psychotherapeutically, in a sort of group shrink manner this evening, clarify your thinking. We spend money on lots of things. We spend it on cigarettes, booze, tape rental, romance novels, Cosmo magazines, home furnishings, and you can have a miserable life, but no, don't spend it on that therapy. That's only for those crazy people. You know, don't get shrunk. And then we also have a poor understanding of what psychotherapy is. Some of us have a poor understanding of what psychotherapy is. They say, well, what do? You just go in and talk to somebody. I mean, why can't you do that down at Joe's bar? You know, why can't we have a Cheers approach where you go into a bar and you got lots of buddies around there and just work out your problems? Well, the difficulty with that is that the bartender down at Joe's Bar, or Sam at Cheers, does not have the technical or theoretical background to work through your problems with you. And there are some very specific things about therapy, as we'll learn tonight. Freud, the father of psychoanalysis and really psychiatry as we conceptualize it in some ways today, said the patient should pay for treatment. The patient should pay, not the insurance. They didn't have insurance back then. The patient should pay. There should be a transaction where the patient has something on the line. And he said that actually negotiating the fee was part of the treatment. And psychoanalysts in their analytic institute talk a lot about that. First of all, if it's your money and not somebody else's, it'll motivate you to get better. One of my patients told me one day, she said, she came in to a session. She said, I just wrote you a check. Do you know how much money I paid you? Or something along those lines. This last month? I said, yep, because I knew how many groups she'd been to. She said, that was a lot of money. I said, yep. She said, something along the lines of, I really should be working on this if I'm paying you all this money. And I said, yep, or something along those lines. Motivates the patient to get better. And I ask people to consider the pay me now or pay me later philosophy. Pay me now or pay me later. If you've got a kid who has ADHD and your child is not getting treatment and is running around out of control at school, not concentrating, not getting his lessons, not able to think, not able to socially integrate, I invite you to have the child evaluated. Pay me now or pay me later. Or pay Dr. Tina Evans or Dr. Alan Brown now or pay them later. Get the child evaluated now and helped and get it nipped in the bud, or wait until there are far more difficult problems later on. Same way with codependency. Pay me now or pay me later. Or pay the therapist of your choice now or pay them later. But I suggest nipping the problem in the bud. If you've got the problem, go for a solution. Unfortunately, health insurance and mental health coverage is a lot like this cartoon where a woman comes in and is talking to the therapist and says, my insurance company says I have to tell you my problems in 25 words or less. Unfortunately, these days, the ability to have psychotherapy is not really all that much in fashion, particularly with healthcare costs going up. People say this is the decade of the brain, where I'll be able to fix it with a pill. And I think it shorts the importance of psychotherapy. This is something I've heard before. You're not a provider. I can't see you. Well, of course they could see me. They can see anybody they want to. Reach in their pocket, pull out some money, pay me, see me. Or anybody else. I'm not here to cruise for patients. I have plenty of patients right now. I'm not trolling for patients. But go see somebody and get some help. Pay them if you have to. I mean, we pay for cars. We pay for microwaves. I just bought a 31-inch TV. I got a good deal on it, too. We pay for things like that. Why can't we pay for therapy? Why is it so inconceivable that we reach into our wallet, pull out something, and pay to get better? That really blows me away. My supervisor at Mayo Clinic, Dr. Milliner, said this. He said, suicide or homicide by the patient is almost always due to a failure of therapeutic empathy on the part of the analyst or therapist. In other words, if you have a borderline patient and they go out and kill themselves or come in and kill you in a borderline rage, it's probably because you screwed up. Probably because you weren't there, you as a therapist I'm talking about, they're affectively, empathically attuned to their needs. In short, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm telling you is psychotherapy is not as easy as going in and talking at Joe's Bar or Cheers and just spilling your guts to somebody and the problems are going to be better. It's something which is basically surgery on the mind. Now, I suggest that most people, if they had a brain tumor, would not go down to Joe's Bar and say, hey, can you cut out my brain tumor? You know, one presupposes that there's going to be some technical sophistication which is required in excising those troublesome little neoplasms up in the brain. Well, there's also some expertise which is required for excising problems in the psyche, for helping people work through their problems and get on to a better adjusted life. So, the question, you want a decent life or console TV? I mean, it's a priority. You could go through a good psychotherapeutic course for codependency for about the same thing that you could get a good console TV for. Okay? Let me ask you another question. If we know what to do, why don't we? Maybe some of you have, in the privacy of your own mind, as you go to sleep at night, known that you needed to do something, or known that somebody that you love or care about needs to do something. So why don't they? Why don't you just say, stuck? Why don't you move? Why don't you do something? Why don't you say, okay, Cady makes sense. Forget the console TV. I'm going to get my codependency taken care of. Why don't you? This came to me in a group session when one of my patients in my Thursday morning codependency group asked me this. She said, I have been reading in this book by Terry Kellogg that you should treat the cause of the problem and not just the symptoms. So how can you treat the cause of codependency if the cause was back in your growth and development? You know, back when you were a little munchkin, okay? Why can't you go back and treat that? Isn't that where you need to treat? And of course, you can't roll back the hands of time, but you can identify that the formative influences which you had as a child led you to develop particular beliefs, like it's normal for mommy and daddy to beat on each other, or it's normal for me to feel like I'm a worthless, no-good slime because that's the way my parents treat me. Because if I weren't worthless, no-good slime, they would be saying, I love you, you're a good boy or a good girl, mommy and daddy love you, we care about you. They'd be a little bit more giving, they'd allow you some flexibility, they wouldn't be rigid, they wouldn't be controlling, they wouldn't be intrusive, they wouldn't constantly be violating your boundaries. That's what children learn. They internalize this as they grow up. They learn to believe certain things about who they are as people and the way the world is. And their beliefs cause them to behave in particular ways. And this leads to their taking particular actions. Their actions cause effects, and after these effects occur, they stop, like we all do, scratch their heads and say, that's pretty interesting. What can I conclude from those effects? And what they conclude and the inferences that they draw lead them to develop particular symptoms. Now don't worry if you're not getting this the first time around, because we're going to go over it and over it and over. You'll get it, I promise. They develop symptoms. The symptoms feed back into the belief system, and there you are again, stuck in your beliefs, around and around and around. And anything new and unexpected which comes into your life must be filtered through your belief system. Stop and think. Anything unusual happen to you today? Somebody cut you off in traffic, or somebody stick it to you at work? And did you say, well, no good so-and-so. The reason they must have done that is such and such. The belief. People are no good, dirty bums. They'll stick it to you every time. Or business, I mean, it's just a dog-eat-dog world. I mean, everybody, every son of a gun is out there just for himself. Beliefs. Any new and unexpected event which occurs is filtered through your belief system. And we're going to come back to this shortly, but before that, I want to show you the way some people develop a belief system. This was a study done on some young ladies that developed an eating disorder. It was published in the American Academy of Psychoanalysis Journal by Bempered and his buddies. And those of you that have heard me lecture on eating disorders have probably seen these graphs before. How many of you have heard me talk on eating disorders? Can I see a show of hands? Okay. How many of you have never seen these graphs before? Let me see. Okay. Quite a lot of you have not seen these. Let me tell you what these show. There are about 90 young ladies that went through psychoanalysis, and they were found to have eating disorders. And this is the percentage. All of these numbers right here are the percentage of these 90 young ladies who reported the following things. 62% of them said there was open hostility between their parents. 23% said that the father and the patient were allied against the mother. 33% of them said the mother and patient were allied against the father. 58% of them said that there was a total parent-child alliance. 55% said that the parents' esteem was based on their appearance. Think about that. You're only as good as what the scale says, or how you look in your new clothes that mommy and daddy buy you. 53% said the parents' esteem was based on their achievement. You're no good unless you're in a National Honor Society or make 4.0. 24% said that the parents' esteem was based on their asceticism. Now, these were the real sicko parents. This is the ability to deny, the ability to live and not suck off mom and dad, not ask for money or not eat food at the table, but just deny yourself. And not surprisingly, 18% of these patients, 1 out of 5, had a sibling with an eating disorder. Who wouldn't, coming from a family like this? Now, when we look at the moms and dads and their relationships, this is the kind of relationships that the patients had with their mothers. 62% of them, the mother was excessively concerned about the patient's appearance. 46% the mother was excessively concerned about the daughter's achievement. Only 34% of the moms demonstrated warmth, as opposed to 61% that demonstrated self-sacrifice, or as Terry Kellogg says, the codependent salute. What I'm doing for, 2/3, only 1/3 got the love and the hugs and the mirroring of the warmth. I think that's pretty significant. And tied, 55% and 55%, the patient was never able to meet mom's expectation, and also the patient was in competition with mom. What we're talking about here, at the risk of stating the obvious, is growth and development issues. The way kids learn about the way the world is. This is the way the world is, these young ladies learn from this kind of relationship with their mom. Relationship with the dad is probably a bit worse. 53% of the patients had a father that used them to satisfy his own needs. 38% of them, intimacy, it could be either sexual or emotional intimacy. Only 11% of the dads mirrored the needs and feelings of the patients, which is what we would expect because women tend to be more nurturing and mirroring and empathic to begin with. So it was 1/3 of the women, but only about 10% of the men, the fathers, that mirrored the needs. 36% of the patients were the recipient of excessive pre-Oedipal attachment. I mean, that's what an analyst is going to call it. And 52% of them, the father was clinically disturbed. Dad had a psychological disturbance. 1 out of 5. This is where people grow and live and how they develop their identities as people. Now, coming back to the cognitive feedback loop, let us integrate what we have learned. Childhood. This is the growth and development that codependents, or people with dependent personality, get. They're either abused, or their boundaries are violated, or they're emotionally starved. They can never be good enough. They don't get the feedback. They internalize the belief that I'm worthless. Now, they might not go to school and say, "Teacher, Mommy and Daddy have convinced me that I'm worthless," okay? It's not that clear. But on an unconscious level, the child knows something is wrong. They're not quite good enough. Is this making sense to everybody? Okay. I'm not saying this is obvious. They go to school and say, "I'm worthless. I'm learning this from Mom and Dad." It's a far more insidious under the surface type thing. This belief causes people with codependency to behave in a particular way. Self-loathing, the causes of behavior are self-loathing and emotional starvation. The actions, frantically submissive and self-debasing. Anything for you, dear, oh, just anything, but please don't leave me. This has the effect of making the patient unhappy, feeling out of control, and also perplexed and bewildered because they can't figure out what's going on because they're zooming around this loop and can't get off. Symptoms: depression, demoralization, and clinging dependency, feeding back onto their beliefs. And because they're depressed, demoralized, and clingingly dependent, they integrate a new belief, which is, I knew it. I really am worthless. I'll just have to try harder to please, you name it, to prove my worth. So this belief is added to this one. And then there is a new cause of behavior. It was originally self-loathing and emotional starvation. The new cause of behavior is, I'm rejected, therefore I really must be worthless, therefore I must really try harder. And around and around and around it goes. Self-propagating, gathering momentum with each pass around the loop. Does that make sense to everybody? Everything that comes into your life, the new and unexpected, is filtered through that belief system. Now, there's something else that some women with codependency develop, and that is they learn that certain things will make them feel better. Chocolate being one of them, binging and purging being something else. How many of you have seen ads on TV where there's this incredibly thin, glamorous model saying, "You deserve it. Have such and such chocolate." How many of you have seen those commercials? Okay. Quite a lot of you. You deserve it. It will make you feel so better. Well, it does. I mean, there are some neurotransmitters in chocolate, and it will make you feel better. Also, eating massive quantities of carbohydrates will make you feel better for a while. One of my patients used to, thankfully, love to enjoy indulging in malted milk balls and ice cream, and then would throw them up. And she's getting a lot better. Chocolate is mind-altering. Food is mind-altering. In a codependency feedback loop, I almost said foodback loop, that would have been a Freudian slip. The emotional starvation is replicated in the actual attempts to get better by feeding this emotional starvation with eating. Now, there are a couple of reasons. For one thing, on an unconscious level, psychodynamically, stuffing your face, this kind of stuff, stuffing it in, on an unconscious level, represents a desperate attempt to nurture yourself and feel better. On a biochemical level, it also represents the fact that you will change your neurotransmitters up in your brain by stuffing your face. So anyway, there's overeating for the mind-altering effect. The effect is, unfortunately, that you're still unhappy. Now you're out of control and you're perplexed and bewildered about the whole thing. Symptoms: now not only do you have depression, but you might have binging and bulimia. This feeds back onto your belief, and again, you gather or garner a new belief: I'm worthless, and my eating is out of control, which makes me more worthless. So again, you're worse off than when you started around the loop. And now again, there's a new cause of behavior. There's no use. I'm worthless. I know I'm worthless because I'm overeating and my eating is out of control. I can't change, and around you go. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. And if you're still scratching your head and you're saying, I wish he would go through that one more time, you can go over it in the handouts. And I promise you, if you will read the handouts and again go through this very carefully, it will click into place for you. Now, how many of you have heard the expression, it's to die for? Can I see the hands? Almost everybody. It's to die for. Well, I call this a paroxysmal pavan toward death. And it wasn't just that I was in a highly alliterative mood at the time, but codependency in the episodic violence which can go with it can be quite paroxysmal. And pavan is a sort of slow, stately dance, which this can be. Now, the way the situation begins is up here in the top left, where you have the baseline situation, where you have a tense piece, usually, but not always, between a victimized woman and an abusing man, spouses, significant others, or whatever. The victim is submissive and self-loathing. Then there's a destabilization. It can be either an innocent mistake or the unpredictable significant other is simply looking for a reason to discharge a massive amount of aggression and hostility. So one or the other, it can be a result of. This leads to the fight. Beating, physical abuse, emergency room visits, doctor bills, broken arms. Hey, let me tell you. My son, a while back, had a fracture of his radius and ulna. We took him to the emergency room. He had x-rays. He got it set. You can have a whole course of codependency treatment for one broken arm, I tell you. ER visits. Then after the fight, the beatings, the bruises, the emergency room visits, then you have the apology, the payoff. Oh, please forgive me. I can't believe I did that. You mean the world to me. You're the rose of my eye, or the apple of my eye. Moonlight and sunbeams, just moonbeams, whatever. Just follow you. I mean, it can be sort of a line, you know. Better than good. Oh, you're just wonderful. You're my princess. Please forgive me. I'll never do this again. And because the woman, again, being a little bit stereotypical, but we'll get away from that in a moment. Because the woman's at the core says, oh, I'm no good. And, oh, he's so wonderful because finally he's telling me what I'm worth and he loves me and he cares about me. Oh, this is wonderful. So, the payoff. Feelings of worth, love, acceptance, meaning. The woman has found meaning in her life because she's finally been accepted by her abusive, repetitively abusing significant other, and now everything's going to be okay. And then, back to the baseline situation until it happens all over again. Does that make sense to everybody? This is the payoff. This is what keeps driving it. Around and around and around and around. The statistics show that women will sometimes leave abusive, battering husbands 12, 16 times. I don't know what the current statistic is, but over and over and over, and then they'll go back because the payoff is so good. Freud, again, said people tend to behave in a way to maximize pleasure and minimize pain. In a codependent relationship, this sense of worthlessness, self-debasement, and no change being required with the great pleasure of the payoff, which I just reviewed with you, leads to this enmeshed relationship where you stay stuck. This is the great pleasure and the avoiding of pain right here, but ultimately you're heading toward really some significant pain. Is the SO an SOB? Now I know of at least one of you out there this evening that probably knows about the Hegelian dialectic. Probably more than one. But Hegel was a philosopher, and he said that the way things go is you have a thesis, and then an antithesis, and then a synthesis. In other words, you have something here, and then you have a counterposing argument here, and the two average out, and then you have a new way to go. If you look at the victim over here, the thesis, the victim is a victim of growth and development. And frequently, her characteristics are dependent and passive. She, in some ways, encourages, is an easy target, has ongoing loss of face and perceived worthlessness in the eyes of the attacker. That's the thesis. The antithesis is the victimizer, who is also a victim of sometimes his growth and development. Now, this is a very important concept. The abuser as victim. Because this is one of the places where people can get some healing in their codependent relationships and get rid of a lot of the anger from the past. The victimizer as victim. He is, frequently hostile and angry and a real time bomb. Although, again, I must tell you, I've had men that have been victimized by vicious, abusive, sadistic women. It can happen. Just like women can be abused by vicious, sadistic, mean men. But typically, the man is hostile, angry, and a time bomb, He is encouraged and obliges the victim by abusing her. This ongoing encouragement is perceived by the lack of boundaries and limits of the victim. Now you say, perhaps you're sitting out there, you've been abused, and you say, well, Doc, now you're going a little far. I've never invited that kind of abuse. Well, have you set any limits? Have you said, the next time you do this, I'm out of here? Or better yet, you're out of here? Have you set any limits? Have you made any plans? Have you done anything definitive? Are you just letting the cycle propagate? The bottom line is, the unconscious bargain is kept. The status quo is maintained. The uneasy truths of the relationship is better than facing the demons of the past for both participants. Because in order to get better, this growth and development and this growth and development both have to be addressed. When we look at the pas de deux, or the dance between the two of them, the growth and development of the victim, we see a cold, cruel, and emotionally disengaged parenting style. The abuser, we see the victim of physical abuse. Frequently, he has been beaten, abused, victimized, and he's mad as you know what, and he ain't going to take it anymore. The internal reality on an unconscious level of the victim is, I'm worthless. Now again, she doesn't go around saying, I'm worthless, hit me. It's not on a conscious level. The abuser, I'm angry and I'm going to hurt somebody. The reaction to the abuse, I guess I deserved it. The abuser, of course it's my right to abuse. Had a patient at Mayo one time, a woman. She said, I met my husband's first wife recently. He never abused her, but he did abuse me. And when I started digging, the first wife had a healthy childhood. And this man knew she wasn't going to take it. If he did it, she would be out of there. So he didn't abuse her. Now, consciously, he did not make that choice, but on an unconscious level, he did. The second wife, my patient, did not have a healthy child. He obliged her by abusing her. Encouragement. No limits are set, and thus it becomes a self-perpetuating reality. For the abuser, what's the encouragement? How do you feel better? Discharge of aggression. You know? Had a bad day? Go home and beat your wife. Take out all your frustrations. Discharge of aggression. What's the perception of the other? The woman typically says, oh, he's mad, I must have done something wrong. The man says she must really be worthless or else she would have stopped me. It's conflict. All this stuff going on underneath the surface, nobody's talking about it, everybody's acting out, everybody is continuing, not because they're bad people, not because they're consciously trying to do that, but everybody's continuing to act out their programs that were put into them as they grew up. And sometimes we have marriages like this. The Lockhorns. It's easy to remember our anniversary. We got married during the Tet Offensive. Sometimes it seems like relationships are like that. So, at this point, right before we all stand up and take a quick stretch break, I want to ask you, is the status quo worth dying for? This is something that one of my patients said was one of the most incredibly useful questions I had ever asked her. Is the status quo worth dying for? What have we talked about? We've talked about what is codependency, what propagates it, what are the consequences, what's going on underneath the surface, why do two people stay in a sick, pathological, enmeshed relationship and not doing anything about it? And now I'm going to ask you, is it worth dying for? And the last part of the talk, I'm going to talk about ways to get better. Let's stand up, take a couple of minutes stretch, and then we will quickly resume. Niacin, or Marplan, which was actually used as an anti-tubercular drug. It found ready acceptance because doctors were comfortable with it, didn't have any major side effects, and it was the only game in town. The only other game was giving your patient electroconvulsive therapy, shock treatments, and back then it was very crude and a very brutal procedure, so this was the only game in town. In 1952, Thorazine came out. It calmed agitated, depressed patients, but it really wasn't. It's not an antidepressant. In 1957, tofranil or imipramine came out, but it's a medication that has lots of bad side effects. It is a tricyclic antidepressant. And from 1957 until 1987, that was it. You were stuck with a medication that gave you side effects. In 1987, Prozac hit the market. The important thing was a relative lack of side effects. But it's only as effective as imipramine. It's no better than imipramine. No better. In fact, most physicians were not really excited about Prozac when it came out. I remember nobody was excited in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston in 1987 when Prozac came out. They said, it's no better than anything else. What was not really appreciated was it was a medication that was so harmless in most cases that anybody could prescribe it. Family doctors, even psychoanalysts could prescribe it. And their patients would not interpret things like, you're trying to kill me with this medication that's giving me all these bad side effects, because that relationship can get pretty warped between analysts and their analysts. So even the psychoanalysts could prescribe it, and it's safe. You can overdose on a month of stuff, 2 months of the stuff, no problem. Not even have to get your stomach pumped at the emergency room. You do that with a week of tricyclic antidepressants and you're dead. So it's a pretty safe medication. Now, currently, when we look at the antidepressants, there are about 6 options. The serotonin-specific reuptake inhibitors, Prozac, Zoloft, Paxil, and Luvox, which is just out on the market last month. The serotonin and norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors, the Effexor, which has been out a while and is an excellent drug, and Serazone, made by the home team, Bristol-Myers Squibb, here in wonderful Hoosier country, and it is being launched this week. Atypical agents, these tricyclics, the old-timey ones, tofranil, Pamelor, Elevil, Bivactyl, Cinequan, lithium, and the monoamine oxidase inhibitors, of which Nardil and Parnate are the 2 major players. Those are the meds. Now that you've heard them, you can forget them. I just want you to be exposed to them. This is like back in college. I went to school at North Texas State University, and back then, streaking was all the rage. That's where the co-eds would rip off their clothes and run naked through the campus. And now that you've seen these meds just sort of go streaking by, at least you have been exposed to them. And you can look at them in your handout if you need further guidance. The 6 that are probably the most exciting medications out of them, however, are the serotonin-specific reuptake inhibitors and then the serotonin and norepinephrine specific reuptake inhibitors. This is the new kid on the block. Serazone came out this month, March, or actually it's coming out now, launched in March. Study back in 1993, however, looked at 4 different medications. Question, are any of them better than anything else? This was a sort of mano-a-mano, head-to-head, fight-to-the-finish contest between 4 antidepressants. One of them was imipramine or tofranil, the old-timey kind. Another one was fluoxetine or Prozac, the newfangled kind. Another one was Welborn, a newfangled medication, and trazodone, which is a sort of medium-fangled medication. It's been out for about 10 years now. It's in generic. It's also by the home team, Bristol-Myers Squibb. Here's what they found. In a head-to-head combat between these 2 medications, by the way, let me tell you about this. These numbers over here refer to the Hamilton Depression Scale. 30 is very, very bad, and 0 is very, very good. 40 means you want to die. You're so depressed you can barely pick yourself up off the floor. You don't even have the energy to pick up the gun to kill yourself with. 0 is you're a happy camper, you have no problems in the world, things couldn't be better, life is sweet. So up here is bad and down here is good. So when you look at Prozac and imipramine head to head, they're about the same. Neither one is better than the other. This is trazodone versus imipramine. Again, neither one is significantly better. This is, again, Prozac and imipramine. Neither one is better. This is trazodone versus imipramine, trazodone by nose here. And this is 4 of Welborn. They're about the same. Bottom line, they all work. You just got to get one that doesn't have side effects. That's the take-home message. Now, I again went back to the scientific literature and read their second article Will popping pills banish your blues? The true truth about Prozac and other mood changers. Never knew I could get so much good information at the supermarket. Now, I encourage you, if you want to, get this magazine and check it out. I apologize for this slide, but you can make out most of the stuff. This is by a woman who had jaw pain, took Prozac, and got better. She was, as we say in dynamic psychiatry, narcissistically wounded that she had something that a medication would make better. And I view this entire article as a way of working out her neurotic conflicts about the fact that she actually got better on an antidepressant. How she did. She said, my mood got better. So what did she conclude? Because my mood improved after taking an antidepressant, for example, does that imply that I suffered from a low-grade depression that simply went undiagnosed? Probably so. Dysthymia, low-grade depression certainly could improve with Prozac. And a somatic disorder, where you have jaw pain, for example, because you're depressed, can certainly happen. So that scientific citation was given to you mainly as an example to be careful about what you read. Looking at medications, there are basically two types out there that you need to be aware of. There are the antidepressants, I've talked about them, and there are the anti-anxiety agents. Antidepressants are appropriate and non-addictive. You can't get hooked on an antidepressant. You're not going to end up in some back alley trying to score some Prozac or some Zoloft. Typically, they all work, but you've got to pick one with the fewest side effects. Any medications which gives you side effects, probably not the best medication for you to be on, ought to be on another. I tell my patients there's never any reason they ought to have side effects on a psych med. The night of the living dead, the zombification of psych patients is over and done with. Let me caution you that anti-anxiety agents are not a permanent solution. They're acceptable for short-term use to damp down some of the anxiety, but you can get hooked on them. And I particularly advise patients to stay away from Xanax or alprazolam, the most addictive of all the benzodiazepines on the market. I told a group of people that when I lectured on depression, I had a distinguished elderly lady at the end that wanted to fight with me about how Xanax was the best thing since sliced bread. And I said, well, maybe for you it is, but for most of my patients, in my experience, it's also the most addictive. Now, this is my bonehead advice on prescribing antidepressants. Sometimes I give lectures to physicians, and I find that to talk to physicians, it's best to put things in simple terms so everybody can understand it. So my advice to physicians, and this is something you might want to file away, is pick an agent and stay put. Pick something and stay with it. Don't just switch willy-nilly. Adjust it up to the maximum dose. You can't say something has been a failure until you go to the maximum dose. 80 milligrams of Prozac, 200 milligrams of Zoloft, 50 milligrams of Paxil, 375 milligrams of Effexor, 200 milligrams of Luvox. Look at it in the package insert. Go to the library. Look it up on the physician's desk reference. Anybody can figure out what the maximum dosage of a medication is. However, if you begin to get into side effects as you go up to the maximum dose, patient isn't better, side effects are happening, cut your losses, bag that one, and start over with something else. And use it at the maximum dose for an adequate period of time. Only then, if the patient doesn't get better, should you change. That's what I suggest. Now we talked about pills, and we got rid of pills in about 5 minutes. Now let's talk about some of the good stuff, talk therapy or psychotherapy. Now, psychotherapy is frequently about talking about your feelings. This guy says, okay, I'll share my feelings. I want to watch the ball game. We're talking about a little bit more than just sharing superficial feelings. We're talking about the role of what people have grown up and lived through, working through conscious or unconscious conflicts. In psychotherapy, we say, what happened to you has unique value. We include a model of the mind which has to do with the unconscious, the part of the mind which is not easily accessible to you. It's the part of the mind, for example, on the part of the codependent that says, I'm worthless, I deserve being beaten up, etc. Now, you never say that consciously to yourself. At least most people would. And the unconscious role of the perpetrator's mind, the victimizer, who says, deep down, well, of course I deserve to beat my wife to a pulp, or I deserve to beat my husband to a pulp. I'm going to try to be liberated here. And I'm going to work out my aggressive conflicts by doing so. That's on an unconscious level. It's not typically accessible. Only by talking about it in a very careful way can you get down to that. Psychic determinism says that what's going on in your life is a manifestation of these conflicts underneath the surface. Everything is determined in your mind. And past is prologue. What you went through as a child does determine, to a significant extent, the way you're going to be as an adult. There are a number of types of therapy. There's individual therapy or dyadic therapy, which is a sort of classical Freudian, talk to me, let's explore your problems kind of therapy. And there's group therapy. Group therapy is a lot of what I practice for the treatment of codependency, and there are some very specific reasons why it's a good form of therapy. For one thing, it uses the typically untapped collective experience of a group of people. It uses a principle of consensual validity. You get 8 codependents together, and even though one of them might not have a clue that what she is doing, and my groups are all women, I haven't had a demand enough yet for an all-male codependency group. Hey, I'll start one tomorrow if I've got 4 or 5 men that want to report for duty. But one woman may say, gee, this has always seemed reasonable to me, and 7 other women who don't share that particular life experience sitting around a group can say, that's crazy! You ought not to tolerate that. Throw the bomb out! And you have one person saying, well, this is my life experience, and person number 2 says that's crazy, person number 3 says that's crazy, person number 4 says that's crazy, person number 5 says that's crazy, and around that principle of consensual validity, group theory in action. I firmly believe in the synergistic strength and intelligence of a group of people. I found working in groups, particularly on some challenging products and projects, to be extremely helpful and to give me information and an approach that I didn't have in my own independent way. So I believe in the synergistic strength of a group, and also less tendency for a therapist to become autocratic. Well, do it this way, or well, forget about that, do it this way. It's more democratic. Well, have you thought about this? And somebody else will say, but what about this? And somebody else will say, well, I did it this, and it worked. So it's a more democratic, more holistic method. How does psychotherapy cure? It allows the unconscious and preconscious conflicts, which are going untapped and uninvestigated in a patient's psyche, to be sort of regurgitated into consciousness where it can be looked at and dealt with. It allows the patient to experience some good stuff. Unconditional acceptance from a group of people. Unconditional acceptance. You're worthwhile. The antithesis of the codependency core. You're worthwhile. We care about you. Let's explore what your issues are. Stabilizes a patient in a therapeutic holding environment where these conflicts and problems can be worked out. And in classic therapy, and also to an extent in group therapy, the therapist serves as what's called a beacon of object constancy. In other words, somebody that is not going to change. You can come in and you can call your therapist a no-good, arrogant SOB, and they'll say, my, you certainly seem angry. Why don't we look at this? If you call somebody at work that, they'll say, see you later. You'd never get away with that. So in therapy, that's also what would happen if you went down to Sam's bar on Cheers and told somebody at the next bar stool you're a no-good, SOB, you get knocked off the bar stool. You say that in group therapy, it can be looked at and worked through. In the unconscious, you see, we talk about Freudian slips. We believe in the role of the unconscious. This is for you Gary Larson fans out there. Freudian slide. Group therapy. How does it work again? We use this consensual validity principle. Everybody says we're all in this together. There's an increased ability for empathy. This is really quite a novel experience for the codependent. They've never experienced empathy or a sense of worth before in their lives. They say, hey, this is good stuff. I like this. I think I'm going to come back. And this self-reinforcing, I like this. This feels good. I've never had this experience before. Is extremely helpful and self-reinforcing in its own right. It avoids the neurotic targeting of one therapist. In other words, you, doctor, are my problem. I don't have any problems. If you say, you, person number 2, and you, person number 3, and you, person number 4, and you, person number 5, and you, person number 6, and you, person number 7, are my problem, you can't do that. You can't blame 7 people for your problems. Maybe 1, but you can't get away with blaming 7 other people. And then the collective wisdom of the group, the greater life experiences, and what I call the lapidary principle. This is the way those stones get polished. You throw all the stones in a lapidary tumbler, turn on the motor, fingers around and around and around and around, and it smooths all the rough edges off the stones with the other stones bumping up against them. In other words, everybody's rough edges get smoothed out in the group. And that means everybody has something to give. Everybody has something to give, and also something to take away from. A little hurt, a little wound can sort of rub it off. And that's the way people get better. Now, does it work? In the past, I have shown study after study after study in terms of drug therapy. This is the first time ever in 1.5 years at Mulberry Center that I have shown any studies on therapy. And this one is on group therapy. This was done at Mayo Clinic back in 1976, reported in the American Journal of Psychiatry. This was a study of what happened to people when they came to the intensive psychotherapy center at Mayo Clinic, where people stay for 3 weeks, Monday through Friday, and have group therapy from about 8:30 in the morning until about 4:30 in the afternoon. 2 intense groups per day, and a 3rd group later on, a wrap-up group and some other stuff. This is what people came in with. Let me just start over here. Family relationships, 10.5%, other relationships, 1.0%. So relationships, about 12% of what brought people in. Now, they came in with other problems. That was a minority. But relationships was a significant portion. Dysphoria or feeling sad, 28.6. Somatic symptoms, like the lady with jaw pain in Cosmo, 28.6%. And some of them said, I don't have any problems, 15.8%. Here's a follow-up. At discharge, out of 265 patients, some of them said they were worse, 2.3. Some of them said they were the same. Some of them said they had mild improvement. 35.8% said they had moderate improvement. 27.5% said they had substantial improvement. 15.5% said their symptoms were gone. At follow-up, 8 months later, 26% said they had substantial improvement, and even more of them, 24%, said their symptoms were gone. Conclusion, psychotherapy and group psychotherapy does work and does produce significant improvement. This is what one of my patients told me in group. I said, can I write that down? I'd like to quote that. She said, okay. This is what she said. Said, dealing with pain is like crap. It's like cleaning house. While you're cleaning out the corners, it's a pain in the butt, but when you get finished, it's clean and you're done. And she's finished group therapy. And I hope that her house cleaning stays fruitful and productive for her. Now, there is a hostility about psychotherapy. People say, you've got to be crazy to go see a psychiatrist. And even if you did, certainly you ought not to have to pay. You ought to be a member of your PPO or your HMO. Freud had an explanation for why people had such hostility about the notion that there could be anything the matter with their brains. He said mankind had suffered 3 narcissistic wounds. That means a wound to your pride. Number 1, the earth was not the center of the universe. People used to think it was. Copernicus proved them wrong. Second, Darwin, according to some people, proved that man was not, quote, created, unquote, but evolved. Now, I happen to believe that both can be true. But, according to some hardcore evolutionists, there is no creator, there is no God, people just evolve. I don't believe it, but a lot of people were wounded narcissistically. And then Freud said, not only is the earth not the center of the universe, not only were you not made in God's image, according to Darwin, but the third thing, you're not even the master of your own mind. You need to know what's going on upstairs. Now, this was more than people could take. And so they said Freud was a dirty-minded sexual pervert that only studied sick people and had his own dirty fantasies. And there was a great deal of hostility about psychoanalysis. What's a contemporary view? The contemporary view is if you can't fix it with a pill, if it ain't a neurotransmitter irregularity, it ain't relevant. Because any real self-respecting illness, you ought to be able to fix that with a pill. And that is a hand-down from Descartes, who said mind and body were distinct. What's going on in the mind cannot affect the body. What's going on in the body cannot affect the mind. We know that not to be true, but there's still that thread going through modern thought. Now, in terms of therapy, this is another reason why Sam's Bar is not a good place to go and get your therapy. Because hopefully you want somebody that's not as disturbed as you are. Now, this is how therapists can be disturbed. These are called boundary violations, or can develop into boundary violations, and the therapist's own neurotic conflicts. For example, if you're disturbed by a patient's reproaches and accusations, maybe you have a problem if it's getting to you. If you can't say, well, it's just her neurotic conflict, she'll get better, I'm okay, I'm not going to worry about it. I mean, if you've got problems, then maybe you ought to look at it. But becoming disturbed, a compulsive tendency to hammer away at certain points, well, you're just going to keep going until they get it. Arguing with the patient, feeling that the patient has got to get well, got to get well, got to get well. If the patient doesn't get well, I'm not a good therapist. Some increase or decrease of interest in the case. Cultivating the patient's continued dependence in various ways. Oh, I like my patients to graduate, get out of therapy. And we frequently have discussions in group. When am I going to be, do you think I'm going to get well? I say, well, let's see what the group has to say about it. Put it back in the group. Let other people talk. Repeatedly experiencing erotic or affectionate feelings toward a patient. Had one patient that came to see me in Winona, Minnesota, she'd slept with 3 previous therapists. Why? Because she was a loose woman? No, not true. Because of what she had grown through growing up, where she was a victim and perpetually acting out that intense need to be taken care of. You got to watch out for this. Take home message of this slide. Pick your therapist carefully. All right? Stanley Graben had this to say about good therapists. He said it didn't matter if you were a Jungian, Freudian, or commonsensian. All therapists that were really good and produced really good results had these things in common. In terms of their therapeutic character, they showed empathy and concern for the patient, a caring and protective attitude, a warm approach, the ability to reawaken hope in the hopeless patient, which he equated with therapeutic forcefulness. The expectation that the patient's life will improve. Very important. I tell my patients they're going to get better. That's all there is to it. Not to despair. Don't give up. Always be there and be friendly and respectful. Not overly friendly, not overly goading, but friendly and respectful to the patient. Changing the belief system. Let's boil it down even simpler. I've told you about what therapy is, the Freudian slip, the Freudian slide, what to look out for in a therapist, what therapists should be if they're good. How does it boil down in a nutshell? I bet you wondered when this was going to come back. This is the feedback loop. Let's look at where therapy figures in. First of all, please notice that this is a new era. These are new empowering beliefs which you bring into your belief system, and you change your belief system from I am worthless, which you have dredged up from your unconscious, examined, concluded it was not correct, and set aside. And now you bring in this belief you are somebody You're going to be in charge of your destiny, and by golly, you can change. This causes you to behave in a particular way. You're empowered, you're optimistic, you have improved education and understanding, therefore you have sensible behavior. The effects, you feel in control, positive and optimistic. The symptoms, you're more upbeat, positive, motivated, and happy. And this feeds back in, again, a self-perpetuating loop. Every triumph, every little small win feeds back again and again and again and again and again in a positive way, as opposed to what I was telling you about, that little piece of soap that was rotating around the drain right before it got sucked down. That's the opposite. My friend Zig Ziglar, who I'm going to tell you about shortly, says you are who you are and where you are because of what you put in your mind. I love that quotation. It's so relevant. You have to be aware of what you put into your mind, and therefore you have to accept some appropriate responsibility for what you put into your mind. We'll talk about what that responsibility is. Recovery in psychotherapy is not going to work if you're seriously compromised biologically. In other words, if you're so beat down, that's what the good old boys would say, beaten down. If you're so beaten down that you can't think straight because you're depressed, you're not going to be able to reason your way, group therapy or not, into recovery. And therefore, you got to get that biological depression taken care of. You do have to become aware of this dysfunctional, self-defeating self-doubt. It always happens when I do that. I can never change. It's always going to turn out that way. Maybe my life was just meant to be this way. Got to become aware of that. You need to relentlessly self-brainwash yourself from time to time. I suggest motivational tapes. I suggest recording your own affirmations and listening to them. And multiple resources are available. Now, this is not the kind of resources I'm suggesting. But keep in mind, this is a free country. You can put anything you want in your mind. Now, while you're here tonight, you're sort of under my control. And I appreciate your being here. So I can put what I view as the good stuff into your mind. But when you leave here, you can put anything you want into your mind. You can go get romance novels, or you can play Mortal Kombat. This is a story about a teenager who played a lot of Mortal Kombat. Over and over and over and over. And at the end, he went nuts. He confused video game fantasy with reality and was found innocent by reason of insanity in a stabbing and committed to a state psychiatric hospital for at least 6 months. He spent hours playing the violent video game Mortal Kombat. He nearly stabbed a classmate to death in the belief he would advance the game's next level. You are who you are and what you are because of what you put into your mind. Not only in the March 1995 Cosmo can you read about the world-class courtesan secrets and about courtesan, but should you use your claws to get ahead, and if so, how much? Can you cheat a little or even seriously flirt and stay happily married? It's your choice. What do you want to put into your mind? Now, I have some suggestions about what you can put into your mind, but you thought I'd never get to this. April 20th, 1995, excitement, Evansville. Don't worry, this is not the end of the talk. This is a small commercial break here. Zig Ziglar, my buddy, is coming to town. He's going to talk about how to stay motivated. And it is going to be a blowout motivational event. We're going to put some good stuff in your mind. I'm talking about the psychiatry of success, shrinking your way to the bottom line. And a friend of mine, Paul Horgan, is going to be talking about focusing on the future. I invite you all to come. You can buy your ticket tonight if you want. Now, that's the end of the commercial. What happens when positive thinking isn't enough? What happens if you say, okay, I've said all the affirmations and I ain't better yet? Well, you have to do more than say affirmations. You have to have some discipline. You have to get out of bed in the morning. You have to do it, like Nike says, just do it. You have to set the limits. You have to stick to your guns. You have to hang on in there, baby, until it's done and finished. Affirmation without discipline will yield delusion. You're not going to get any better. You'll stay stuck. You have to have some self-discipline. According to Jim Rohn, the difference between failure and success is this. Failure is a few errors in judgment repeated daily. Success is a few good habits repeated daily. That's it. It's not big, but on the other hand, it's enormously important. It's what you choose to put into your mind. It's what you choose to let happen to you that's going to determine the kind of life that you lead. Aristotle said quality is not an act. It is a habit. The kind of life that you lead will be a function of the kind of habits that you develop. This is a young lady that's got some good habits. Meredith Rainey. She says, there's no better way to learn to set goals and work toward them than through athletics. I wake up every day thinking of winning a medal, she told the students. That's what motivates me to run 10 miles on cold mornings. You get some goals. You say, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get better. I'm going to discipline myself and work through to the end. We're wrapping up. In terms of a cognitive approach to how to get better and how to do it without drugs, first of all, eliminate the possibility of an underlying depression. If you ticked off 5 of those 9 vegetative symptoms of depression, you need to do some serious talking to somebody about whether or not you need some serious psychotherapy for your depression or possibly even medication. If you're severely vegetatively dead in the dumps, pit black, despairing, depressed, even group therapy is not going to be your salvation. Passing that step, become aware of your self-talk. I suggest journaling. Write down what you're saying to yourself. Confront the things that you're doing which continue to defeat you and keep you mired in your cycle of codependency. And then discipline yourself to set limits. This works whether or not you're dealing with depression, codependency, alcoholism, sexual addiction, whatever. You have to discipline yourself to set limits. How to get better. Recognize that codependency can be life-threatening. Psychotherapy to address the cognitive distortions which allow this vicious cycle to keep propagating. Medications to treat depression and or binging. Formal chemical dependency or eating disorder treatment. The death of dependency. We've talked about death by dependency. Now let's talk about putting this sucker to death once and for all. Getting rid of it. Burying codependency. 2 things you have to do. First of all, you have to accept a number of things. You have to accept yourself as worthwhile, a unique creation, a pearl of great price, a child of God, if you will, someone that is worthwhile and deserves better than what you've been getting. Then you have to accept your abuser. I'm not saying you have to embrace him and hug him or her and plant kisses all over them and say, oh, I forgive you. No, you have to accept your abuser as a victim because that's the reason they're abusing you. Doesn't mean you have to forgive them. Doesn't mean you have to let it keep going, but you have to accept them as a victim. You have to accept your former codependency. See, if you say, I was no good then you're saying part of you was no good. Some of the choices that you made were not good. But your codependency at that time was the best way that you knew how to cope. Best way you knew how. If it weren't the best way that you knew how, you wouldn't have been doing it that way. You would have done something different. But now, hopefully, you have some new options and some new insights. You need to accept the foibles, crimes, and molestations of others. Had some women that have been terribly sexually abused. You have to accept that the reason that happened is, even though it was sick, perverted, pathological, wrong, and the product sometimes of a twisted and warped mind on the part of the perpetrator, the reason that it happened was that they were doing the best they could. If they weren't, they wouldn't have been doing it. They were trying. They were struggling to find balance. Doesn't mean it was right, doesn't mean it was acceptable, doesn't even mean you have to forgive them, although some authorities say that you do. But you do need to accept that that's probably the best that they could do. If they could have done better, they would have. And then claim the right to determine your own destiny, what you're going to do. You got to claim it. You got to say, I deserve better than this. I close with this. One of my patients brought this back from a vacation. We are like trees. We must create new leaves, new directions in order to grow. To get better from codependency, to recover, you have to create new leaves, new directions, branch out in a different way from the ways that you've considered before. Thank you very much. Be glad to stay for a few minutes and take questions. We'll pause for about a minute. Let those that would like to leave. There are some brochures over there on codependency groups, Excitement Evansville, and if you want, buy your ticket tonight. We'll be glad to sell them to you. I'm going to pause for 1 minute and then take questions from the floor. Thank you all for coming. Hi.
That's great.
You're welcome.
My son's here at the Mulberry Center.
Yes, ma'am.
Alcohol and drug abuse.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you think you can see him?
I'd love to, and thank you for asking, ma'am. I'm about to leave town on Wednesday. How old is he?
18.
Is he on the adolescent program? I would suggest Tina Evans. She's a wonderful child and adolescent psychiatrist.
We're having him diagnosed for ADD also.
Okay.
I think there's some underlying.
All right. She's very good at it. The two people you should probably ask Dr. Wooten, first of all, is the medical director there. If you're concerned about ADHD, I'd ask for him to be evaluated by Dr. Jeff Gray, who's a neuropsychologist, just the color gray, like what you're wearing, gray. And then Tina Evans for a child and adolescent psych evaluation.
He's going to need some very long-term psychotherapy.
Okay.
Very good.
All right.
Very much.
Talk with Dr. Evans about it.
Okay, Dr. Gray.
Dr. Gray.
ADD.
For the testing, for the neuropsychological testing.
They've given him some things to fill out. I don't know.
That's probably part of the testing. Yeah. Let me answer these questions. Thank you for coming. Okay. Okay, 1 minute is up. I'll be glad to take questions from the floor.